This is the Being Better podcast. I'm Chris Brock. I'm a writer, I'm an author, I'm a photographer. I have been a magazine editor in America and in the UK. I've also been a van driver. I've worked in a factory smashing up computers. I've done all kinds of things as I've tried to figure out what the purpose of my life is. It's only now reaching my mid-40s that I realised that maybe the whole point of that question, what is life for, or what is the purpose of life, what's the meaning of life, is a koan. A koan is something that comes from Zen Buddhism, and it is basically an unanswerable question. So you might have heard the question, what is the sound of one hand clapping? Or if a tree falls in the forest and there's no one around to hear it, does it make a sound? Now, you can't answer those questions because they are unanswerable, and that is the point. The point is not to find the answer, but is to explore the question. And it's often this pursuit of an answer that causes us pain. It causes us suffering. We get attached to something that is undefinable or unreachable or impossible, and that causes us discomfort. In Buddhism, not that I'm a Buddhist, but in Buddhism they talk about attachment as being suffering. And as humans, we require things to be certain. We need to know the outcomes before we embark on the journey, if you like. We need to know we're going to get there before we try and put in the effort. And half the time, all this humming and hawing wastes so much time that we would be better off just doing the thing anyway and seeing what happens than sitting around wondering if we're going to waste our time, if we're going to look stupid, or whether we're going to get there or not. And the author and thinker Byron Katie, she says, "When I fight with reality, I lose, but only 100% of the time." And often we find ourselves dissatisfied, frustrated that we're not where we want to be, that we don't have everything we want to have, that we aren't in a big enough house with a fast enough car with enough status and respect. And this anger and bitterness and frustration and tension that we feel that keeps us from being in this present moment and constantly striving and pushing for more, keeps that sense of satisfaction out of our reach. This constant striving, this grasping, is focusing on dissatisfaction. We are essentially fighting with reality. And so we need to find ways to get over this fight, to let go, and balance that with the striving. We need to be able to push forward without that dissatisfaction that actually makes life pretty unhappy. There's a very famous saying that sometimes we need to stop the pursuit of happiness just to be happy. And that's what mindfulness does for me anyway, and certainly meditation as well. With meditation, it's an effort to silence that chatter, that constant dissatisfaction of you're not there yet, you're not good enough, you need to work harder, what are all the things on your to-do list, how can you keep everybody happy? And just take a moment to be here now. Meditation is a very powerful tool. It's becoming very popular these days. And some people use meditation to face things that are uncomfortable in their lives. Other people use it as an escape, just a moment of quiet, a tea break from your thoughts, if you like. Other people use other things to escape, to remove themselves from the current situation, from the things that they could really do with facing. Some people turn to drink and alcohol. Other people lose themselves in video games. And that's what makes this conversation that I had this week very interesting, because there's a video game that's been developed by Krish Shrikumar, and it's called Plane. That's Playne. And this video game is about meditation. It's using and subverting the tools of escapism to bring people into the present moment, which is a really interesting concept and something we could all do with from time to time. James Baldwin famously said, "Facing things doesn't always change them, but nothing can be changed until it's faced." And sometimes just being in the present moment helps you face reality, helps to combat the fear of what's going on, what's happening right now, rather than losing ourselves in what we need to do tomorrow, where we've been in the past, punishing ourselves, nurturing that dissatisfaction that doesn't do us any good. So this was probably one of my favourite conversations so far. Krish has been a meditator all his life, and it was only in his 20s and 30s that he started to realise how useful this practice was. And whether you do it through this video game, whether you take time to get outside into nature, it's really vital that we take a moment just to find ourselves in this present place and stop fighting with reality and find peace. Now, I've been rambling on for far too long. Enjoy this conversation with me and Krish. Like I say, it's one of my favourite ones so far, and it's got to be up there with conversations with people like Martha Beck and Jason Garner. I hope you really enjoyed this conversation. If you want to find out more about Plane and you're into gaming, or even if you're not, check it out. It's available on Steam, and it's also on a website, PLAYNE.co. That's plane.co. Check it out, and I hope you enjoy this conversation with me and Krish Shrikumar. So Krish, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. We connected because you've developed a game. I suppose you could call it a game. It's a video game called Plane, which is about meditation. And, we've seen a lot of crossover from like mindfulness and wellness in apps and stuff like that, but not so much in gaming and that sort of thing. So where has this come from? Why did you decide that, video games would be a good way to meditate? Where did that come from?
Right. So firstly, thank you so much for having me on here, Chris. It's great to see you in person, at least through Zoom. And so Plane is a game about meditation, and that is a very weird thing to say. But how it came about was really, it's a very long story, but essentially it was an idea that I had. It was a kind of a idea that I had for a certain type of meditation that I just figured would be great as a video game. But looking back at the whole thing now and kind of trying to give you as succinct a summary as possible, I think the thing about video games is when people think of video games, they think fun and play. And that's all very true. It is fun and play, but also video games are incredibly good at helping us build habits. And the way I'm saying that is it can be very addictive. And as you'll see, as you would have heard with a lot of games, one of the big issues now is addiction to video games. That happens because video games are very good at translating certain things that help us build behaviors. And then I just figured, well, is there a way to use game mechanics to help us build daily habits? So it's not necessarily about getting you hooked on something, but it's more about finding ways it's a terrible word, but finding ways to leverage game mechanics to help you do things that kind of leave a really kind of a positive impact on your life. So really the game itself is, the soul of it is meditation, but everything else is just mechanics to really help you practice these things on a daily basis, because that's what I think a lot of people struggle with. And also it's one of the most important things about things like meditation or even things like exercise is the consistency of the practice.
So, briefly talk us through the game. How does it work? What are the goals? Who do you play? What are the kind of, what's the framework of it? How does it work?
Sure. So basically, Plane is the name of an island. And this is an island that you get in the game. So when you log into the game, you get this island that is entirely barren. It's got a bunch of grass, but it's empty. And there's a wee fox there. And the fox kind of starts translating the story of the island to you and guides you through the game. And what the fox essentially asks you to do is to come back to this island on a daily basis and to practice meditation. And the kind of story arc, if you want to call it that, is a kind of self-discovery. So the fox wants you to find out more about yourself by coming and visiting this island on a daily basis. And when you come back every day and meditate, you start growing things in the island. So the first day you come to Plane, the island, it's empty, but you meditate for about 7 days and you'll start noticing all these small saplings coming out from the ground. And by about the 30th day, you'll start seeing all these kind of small plants that's starting to look like trees, but also you'll notice kind kind of life appearing around you. So you'll suddenly notice like birds coming, there's fireflies at nighttime. Much more later on in the game, you'll also see like butterflies. So the whole kind of idea is that this island grows and transforms with you and your practice. And later on in the game, you also get the option to kind of, you'll unlock certain powers, if you will. I mean, what would a video game be without powers, right?
Yeah,
So you get a couple of powers. To one of them is to change the time of the day, and the other is to change the weather. And the whole idea is that as you build up your island, you can essentially customize how you want your meditation experience to be. Because although there's a story about the island, really it's also about a place that you can go to, that you can meditate in, that really celebrates the sense of nature. And that customization that you get with the power, it just gives you kind of more options to kind of select ambiances, I guess, to meditate in. Like personally, I live in Scotland, but I love the sound of rain and even thunder when I meditate, because when I was a kid growing up in India, like monsoon time, like the sense of that dark clouds coming and the thunder and lightning. I know like imagery wise, it's very negative, but for me, I really love that feeling.
yeah.
And I just put that on plane and I'll meditate in the thunderstorm sometimes, you know? So yeah.
I use an app called My Noise, and
Right.
if it's not raining outside, I can make it rain or whatever it is, and I just put it on my headphones
Perfect.
so I can zone out. But
And how do you find using an ambience, meditating to an ambience and not using any ambience at all?
um, sometimes I need it. I go through periods of meditation where I get deeply into it, and I have like I can go like a few months, and I'm really getting in there. And other times I feel like I plateau, and I'm just almost like I'm just turning up, and I'm sitting there with my eyes shut, but I'm actually not getting anywhere with it.
Right.
My mind is racing, and it just comes and
Right.
goes. But I stick with it, and I stick with it. But then I have to kind of change patterns. So sometimes I'll go through a period where I use guided meditations. Sometimes I'll just use a timer or something like that to kind of remind me where I am. I have another app called Oak, which a guy called Kevin Rose developed, and
Right.
it has an unguided section where it's just literally just a timer, and you can have a gong that goes off every 5 minutes.
Perfect.
Like but it's interesting. Some of the things you were talking about for me seem like they have real parallels in the actual practice of meditation kind of out of the game. So, it does encourage us to slow down and pay more attention to our world. And, through our perspectives, we can, to a certain extent, change our experience of life around us. We pay more attention to things and to more of the positive things. I mean, is that intentional, the way you've done that?
That's a very true observation. I can't say that it was intentional. To be honest, a lot of or most of playing wasn't very intentional. A lot of it was accidental. But certainly, I think what you're saying connects with what I think playing is doing for people, or at least what meditation does for people, because you do start to become. God, it almost sounds like a cliche now because so many people say it, but you do become more present.
Yeah.
Right, you do kind of start paying more attention to what is right here in front of you, as opposed to everything that's behind you. So certainly, I think that happens in playing to some degree, because you are kind of paying attention to this island and the nature that's like around you. But I don't think it was. I wouldn't say it was intentional when I made it.
So, I mean, over your years of meditating, then you haven't actually developed any kind of metaphorical superpowers or anything like that for manipulating the world around you. It would be nice, wouldn't it?
Not yet. Fingers crossed.
I mean, there is a superpower. You've used your skills as a developer to create an immersive environment to help people meditate. I guess that's something that you've been able to share.
Yeah, and certainly that is probably down to meditation itself. Most of what you see in playing has come out of meditation. If it wasn't, I mean, it's obvious to say, but if meditation wasn't part of my life, I probably wouldn't make a game about meditation, but certainly the practice of meditation has helped me not just to come up with ideas or figure out where to take the game, but to be able to persevere with it.
Yeah.
Is certainly one of the big things that I'm still very much learning. Like all of this is still new to me, although I have meditated for years. And yeah, we'll just have to, I guess, see where it's gonna take me and us, I guess.
I mean, why does it? I mean, what's your experience of meditation? It's been a part of your life for a long time. Why do you feel it's important to create something like this and share that?
Right. So this is the thing. Meditation, if someone was to look at my life, they would probably say meditation has been there from a very early age, but it wasn't actually what I would say meditation really is. Because when I was a kid, when I was, I think about 8 years old, I was put into a yoga camp. And I use the term put into because that is what it was.
Yeah.
I was put into a yoga camp with my brother by my dad because my dad was really deep into yoga and meditation as well. He was a landscape architect by practice, but he was very interested in all these kind of different things. And he felt like it would be beneficial for me and my brother to go to this yoga camp. And I think probably as an adult, I'm seeing, looking back now, the kind of tools that it gave me.
Yeah.
But certainly at the time, it wasn't very enjoyable because you have to be up at 5 a.m. and you do hours of chanting and meditation and you do lots of yoga. And as an 8-year-old kid with a very short attention span, it wasn't. It was a bit of torture. And it was also
Yeah.
very weird for me to be away from home. That was also new at the time. But also growing up through my teens, when I moved to the U, because I moved to Edinburgh when I was 10 years old. And around that time, my dad was teaching meditation at home. So he would have all these students coming over the weekends, and I would have to sit in on these. I didn't have to, but I think it would have felt rude if I wasn't sitting in on these sessions. And I remember it always used to, like, there's the story I tell everyone. It's like it used to overrun into He-Man, like the animated
Yeah.
series, which is on at like Sunday mornings. And I used to get so frustrated when I was supposed to be meditating. So it was part of my life, like early part of my life. But I think before I went to college, a lot of chaotic things was happening in my life. And I kind of pretty much dropped everything apart from some of the books that we used to have at home from some of these Indian philosophers called Jiddu Krishnamurti, Ramana Maharshi, Nisargadatta Maharaj, Osho. Like there were these books that would just lie around in the house. And I certainly, through my 20s, I was reading a lot. But I wouldn't say I was interested in meditation as a practice. But later on in my life, again, other turning points and chaos and things happening, it just pointed me back to meditation because I guess a simple way of saying it is I couldn't figure out how else to deal with a lot of the struggles and challenges that I was having. And I turned back to meditation, and actually all the tools that I needed was already there. And I just had to kind of start practicing it and actually consistently build a practice where I would be practicing and studying and learning about meditation on a daily basis. And this is where Plane really comes into, because one of the things that I've realized is actually, if you can nail the practice down, like with most habits, then it just pays dividends. It seems, and also it just seems more difficult than it actually is, because I think it's a lot like exercise. It just seems very difficult because you think you're a person without like the skills or the strength to build habits, but that's not it. It's just there's a lot of lessons that I think we need to unlearn. And if we can unlearn them, then building habits become very easy. And that's exactly what I've tried to do with Plane, is just to kind of show the players that actually it's not as difficult as you think. You can come back here, it'll give you a bit of encouragement. But actually, to be honest, most players, I think, come back to Plane not because of the game mechanics, although that helps them at the beginning. But I think mostly it's their own kind of wisdom that brings them back to Plane at the end of the day, or a meditation practice, if you will.
So you talk about these benefits of kind of sticking with it, and how you kind of felt like you were struggling in your 20s or whatever it was that kind of drew you back to it. What do you think those benefits are of meditating every day and having that consistent practice? What do we gain from that? or what do we lose? That's what the Buddha said, isn't it? It's not what we
Yeah,
gain, we lose everything. We lose anxiety, we lose frustration.
exactly.
And
That's such a beautiful way of putting it. That's very true. I think the question is more of what you lose. And I think we do take up, exactly like you're saying, we do take up a lot of baggage that we're not aware of. We put a lot of things on our shoulder purely out of habit and purely out of just the nature of being human. And we think things are difficult because of us and we blame ourselves, but actually it's those things that we're just carrying without even knowing that we are carrying. And a lot of it is about dropping it, and that's what really meditation helps you, because it's really also difficult to answer that question, because it's kind of meditation, it is kind of like what everyone says who meditates. It is everything to some degree, because meditation, in very simple terms, meditation just helps you see who you really are and how you respond to your reality.
yeah.
And that wisdom fundamentally helps you approach things in a more mindful, kind of peaceful way that just makes everything much more easier. But yeah, certainly it is about learning about the kind of being and the organism that you are, and also what really happens inside that really drives us towards action. Because I used to go through my life doing, as a normal person does, all these different things, thinking I was consciously choosing to do all these things. But actually, the more I'm learning about myself, the more I'm seeing that actually I'm not really in full control of the things that are coming up in my consciousness, but it is driving me towards action. So it's really about meditation. It's a kind of learning about yourself in such a deep sense that it has a real impact in the way you take action and the way you live.
I mean, there is a sense, with some kind of mindfulness practices and some kind of meditation, you have a choice to kind of escape from the troubles of the world. But then other times it's about becoming aware, facing them, and then learning to kind of just let them go in a way. And I know some people who've got into meditation have come, confronted with uncomfortable truths about themselves and about their past, and they've not wanted to continue it because of that. And I know computer games, sometimes or a lot of the time, they're about escape, aren't they? Escapism. Whereas this is, in a way, the opposite of that. It's about come into the game and learn to face yourself and find peace with yourself almost. It's almost like you're flipping it, using technology and flipping it around, subverting it in a little way.
Right. Yeah, I didn't think about that way, but that's actually meaningful, because this is in some ways what has happened with me as well, because video games for me was very much a form of escapism, especially in my early 20s when things were getting very difficult in my life. Video games was certainly a way that I helped to kind of at least escape and forget about what's happening around me. And yeah, I mean, what you're saying, I guess to some degree, meditation is about that kind of directly looking, not necessarily at those things that might be causing you suffering, but more along the lines of why you suffer, and that suffering that is inside you. And I can't remember what exactly you said before, but you were spot on. It's about that kind of essentially just being and letting things be.
Yeah.
And learning to let things be. And this isn't something you start meditating and 3 days in, you're just like, oh, I'm just going to be completely passive. And it's not necessarily about being passive neither, but it's kind of, because we have to kind of let things be to really see it, right? Because I think the more we run away from things, the less we see it. So meditation is a lot about just whatever it is that's there, that's causing you a lot of suffering, to say, you know what, just sit with me for a bit and let's just look at each other. Not try to change each other, and not try to tell each other what to do, but just kind of getting to know that parts of your being that we have just always been so afraid of. afraid of. Now, having said that, it's also, I think, very important to note here that meditation, in my view, is not a silver bullet that you can use to just solve everything about your life, because it is not really about solving things. Now, a lot of us also have gone through, we all have gone through different experiences, and sometimes experiences are a form of trauma that we need to look at with the help of a professional. But certainly, I think what you will find is that most professionals will use meditation as a kind of foundation upon to build a good practice for us to turn inwards and start looking at the really difficult things, and start to get used to them a bit more as well.
I mean, because there is, I mean, doctors are often telling people to deal with stress, get out into nature and, just take some time away from your desk or your work or whatever it is and just get out into nature. But, we're in a lockdown right now. There's a global pandemic going on and people can't leave the house. They might be stuck in the middle of the city and they can't go anywhere for whatever reason. So maybe this is what you're offering people here is an alternative to that, an opportunity to get into another world and just find some space, even if it is in a screen.
That's right.
It's kind of weird. Yeah. You're turning something which is kind of the enemy of a balanced diet of media, almost into something therapeutic and beneficial, which is quite what do they say? It's quite disruptive, really, I think.
Right. No, I think because playing is about nature, I guess. And I was reading something a while back about how when the pandemic happened, that a lot of people were just on YouTube watching videos of just fields and forests. And I think this pandemic has really shown us, myself included, how important it is to just be ourselves. And that really just means be that kind of animal that is us, and we need to be outside, and nature is a part of us. And certainly with Plane, when I built it, I've always just seen it being about trees and being about nature. Not like it, again, it wasn't intentional. I wasn't like, I'm going to make a game about nature and trees and all these things. But for me, nature has been healing in my own journey. And certainly even now, I need to go out into nature as much as I can. And actually I'm learning every day about how little I knew about nature and wilderness and being outside and how enjoyable the sun is. It might also be that I'm just getting older. I have no idea, but certainly added might also be that I'm living up in Scotland, so the sun starts to become a luxury.
Yeah,
and but definitely. Exactly. But yeah, I think it's also one of those things, because we also tend to compartmentalize a lot. And I've done this and I still do it, which is like, if I have a problem, I'll be like, I'll need to do A, B, C, and D to kind of fix it. So with my health, that is sometimes my strategy, but certainly before that really used to be my strategy, which is eat healthy, have this, do cold showers, and do all these different things, and then I'll feel healthy. But actually, this whole idea of mindfulness in nature really isn't those kind of separate things, because this is why I think a lot of people enjoy gardening, because just going out and planting some seeds and gardening for 4 hours under the sun is just enjoyable. And I don't think many people would be able to describe why it's enjoyable. And that's probably similar to what meditation is. If you really ask people who meditate consistently, like what is meditation, it's very difficult to describe it.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be a monk or meditating for hours on end to feel it. Maybe you just garden every day and you will still feel that kind of awareness and that mindfulness through that practice itself.
I mean, there's an old Chinese proverb, isn't it? It's whoever plants a garden plants happiness. And it's kind of, there is something, I mean, I get intensely bored of gardening.
Right.
But there are other things that I do enjoy, and I can spend hours and hours doing them. And they're not cognitive. You're just there and you're in your element. I love going out into the woods. I love walking.
Right.
And people have all kinds of things. And people love gaming. People love.
Yeah.
When Grand Theft Auto came out, Grand Theft Auto 5, and people were people just walking around Los Santos, no agenda. They were just going for a stroll for hours and hours and going up into the hills and just enjoying the sunsets. People just found that very therapeutic, and I guess that's what those kind of people will enjoy playing as well. They're just the kind of sense of just being there in this space and
That's
just
right. Yeah.
no expectations, you know.
Yeah. And I think I think it's a lot like you're saying. It doesn't have to be gardening. It could be going out for a hike or going out for a walk, or even virtual or not. It doesn't really matter to a large degree, I think, because I have I don't know if there's research done on this, so I can't really state it for sure, but certainly simulation of nature I have heard has been shown to kind of stimulate the same kind of biological response to being out in nature. I wouldn't guess it would be to the same degree, but if it helps, then it helps. And it's the same thing with a lot of video games. Exactly like you're saying with GTA, there are communities of people that just ride around and just enjoy it. And also there's what was the other game? No Man's Sky. I remember a few people saying that they would just.
That's the one with infinite planets, right? It just they're all.
That's right. Yeah.
Created. Yeah.
That's right. And I think you can just travel around these to these different planets and just enjoy the environment. I think even through the pandemic, all these news stories of people looking at farmland and woodland, it really goes to show we have a connection to nature, and if it is simulated or not, we still are connected to those things. And the truth is, because there's been a lot of not a lot, but there's been a few comments in playing like, this is just simulated nature, people should just go out and enjoy nature, and I agree 100%. But also I think a lot of us, and again myself included, a long time back, kind of have lost that sense of nature. And I don't want to say disconnected, because I don't think you're ever fully disconnected from nature, but you can get very far. You can get far away from it enough that you won't see it as a good thing, being out in nature. And certainly I think things like GTA with these beautiful environments. I think a better example might be Red Dead Redemption, where you can really immerse yourself in this beautiful nature. I think on a very subconscious level, maybe it does encourage you to go out and kind of see what's actually out there. And I would like to think that Plane does the same thing. In fact, what I did was I did a small feature in Plane where the Fox will nudge the player now and again and let them know, like, the benefits of exercising outside as opposed to just exercising in the house. And I've had a few comments in our Discord channel of players saying, oh, Fox nudged me and I've gone out and done something and I feel so much better. And that's really what I'm doing. And I'm not like preaching nature, but I literally just want people to experience and kind of get close to nature in the way that I have been able to. And I've been fortunate that my wife, she really loves the outdoors, and she's really nudged me the right way to go out into the outdoors. And I'm kind of doing the same for the community in Plane as well, because it is just such a nice thing to realize what nature can give us.
Yeah, it's interesting. You touched on it kind of near the beginning, where you said, we're a part of nature. And there's a sense that when we get back to nature, we get back to our kind of natural selves in a way, and we shed all this kind of baggage that we accumulate in living in these kind of processed worlds. And I've said a few times in conversations with people on this podcast, when you eat a lot of processed food that is kind of far removed from its natural state, you end up with kind of medical problems like diabetes and heart conditions and things like this. They're all kind of conditions of the modern world of our overconsumption of highly processed food. And I think we're living in a kind of spiritually processed world as well. We're living in, big cities where, like you say, we're as far removed from nature as you can get. And then we're getting kind of other illnesses as well, anxiety and phobias, crazy phobias about things. People can't leave the house because they're scared to go outside and can't get on planes and stuff like that, because we are so detached from. This is my theory anyway. We're so detached from nature. So I think anything like that can just getting outside, or even just surrounding yourselves with, I've got some, like, I'm gradually filling up my house with house plants here,
Right.
because it just makes me feel a
Bring
little
the
bit
nature
more,
to you.
yeah, exactly. It just makes me feel a little bit more
Yeah.
just at ease, I guess,
Right.
with life, I suppose, because that's the big thing, isn't it? We've got this existential crisis going on, and we don't know what
So
to do.
true.
We've got this, and especially now in the pandemic, we've lived our lives by this kind of Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. You get up, you go to work, you come home again, and now that's been taken away from us. So we're like, what am I supposed to do now? And we have to decide for ourselves what the structure of our lives needs to look like, and
Exactly.
what our
Yeah.
new normal needs to be. And I suppose things like this are reminding us to just be a little bit more comfortable with ourselves. We don't need that structure.
Exactly. Exactly. And that is so true. I think it's coming back to what you're saying before about what we need to remove in life, or at least putting down these kind of heavy bags that we are carrying just out of habit, and we don't even know we're carrying it, but our arms are hurting. That kind of thing. I think it is so important what you have said, because it is, and we're not at all at fault, but I think the kind of, I have to use this word carefully, but the kind of system that we are in kind has nudged us in certain ways, um, and and I think that's perfectly fine. But we should be somehow aware of the ways that we are getting nudged, so we can make a conscious decision as to what we want.
Yeah.
And I think generally speaking, everyone who I would meet in this lifetime and probably after or before would say that all we want is happiness. And if we could actually intentionally know ourselves, how to nudge ourselves at least towards that happiness, which is paradoxically right here, then I think we would all have a more fulfilling existence. And I think it's like what you're saying about processed foods. I think that's a very good analogy, because it is the same for the mind as well. Um, because even when I was growing up, there were so many things. I was fortunate in that social media and everything was only really a big part of my life when I was in my early 20s, mid 20s. But now people are growing up into it. And even though lots of people are saying, not just in terms of social media, but even video games, how it changes the way that our brain works, and how it's kind of building certain behaviors in our mind that really isn't going to help us on the long run. Though, and those are all really dangerous, because it kind of nudges us away from what we really want, which is actually just to be, and just to
Yeah.
kind of not even like having fun and everything is great, and it is, but it's all these things are a good part of our life, like having fun, being around people who you enjoy being around, being out in nature. All these things are very natural things that we want as human beings, but somehow we have gotten lost in the nudges that we've had into like weird places, and we don't even know that we are being nudged to these kind of difficult spaces that are making our own living more difficult than it needs to be.
I think
Said that in a very roundabout way, but
I think, yeah, I mean, a lot of what we do, we're it's not the nudges are coming not internally but externally. So a lot of our
right,
time is spent up dealing with other people's agendas. We have our
yeah,
responsibilities to our employers, to our families, to our friends, and too often we don't take ownership of our own time. And I guess that's the beauty of meditation. It's like saying, I'm going to meditate for 5 minutes, or I'm going to plane for half an hour, or whatever it is. And this time is me just taking time for myself. This is my agenda. And I can't remember
exactly,
who it was, that some very wise person, they said, a lot of man's problems come from being unable to sit quietly in a room, and just
that's
do
right,
nothing. And I guess
that's right,
that's the same with us. We're so busy being busy, and like
yeah,
we've got all of this. We've got this brain power. We've got this time on our hands, and we need to fill it
yeah,
and do stuff and be productive. And we've got timesheets to fill out. We've got our employer is expecting X hours of work from us today, and we've got our KPIs to meet. But
yeah.
sometimes, let's just take some of that back. And I suppose that's what you're encouraging people to do with playing a little bit.
Yeah, to some degree, but I think Yeah, to some degree, because this is what meditation really is. And just the problem is all the kind of conveniences that technology gives us and all the kind of ways that technology is taking us, and we need to go through these routes. It also has kind of problems that it creates. And a lot of the times we'll need to use technology to solve those problems to some degree. It kind of becomes like a vicious cycle or just ends up piling up. But I think this is the route that we all need to go through, clearly. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. And certainly the way that I think we all have to be more mindful of the way that our mind works. I would even go as far as saying we are probably what our mind is. So we need to really know how we work as an organism. So, for instance, if you know like how easily you can get dependent on things, you would be more mindful about taking on something that you can get dependent to, but gives you a bit of fun. As a good example that I'll bring up is a game called Animal Crossing on Nintendo Switch. Now, I might get a lot of hate for saying this, but I love that game. Like it's a great game. I played it for a bunch over Christmas because I just wanted to know what all the hype was about. It's a really adorable game, and especially while we're going through this lockdown, I think a lot of people connected with it because it's warm, it feels homely, and it's just fun and enjoyable in a very very quiet way. But that game should not be engineered as a kid's game. Right. Because it's got lots of kind of gambling mechanics to it. Like, you're hitting the rock and sometimes you'll get a rock, sometimes you'll get a piece of iron that you really want, or sometimes you'll get like a gold coin. Because those are all behaviors that if we get too invested in, it's not going to have a great outcome. Now, Animal Crossing I'm not saying Animal Crossing is a bad game, but certainly there are other games where it is entirely engineered around those dopamine hits. Yeah. And if you're not fully aware of what kind of an behavior that's going to have, then it probably won't have a great outcome. And this is coming from, I used to play MMORPGs a lot when I was young, and I didn't know any of this stuff. And looking back now, and I don't think the developers were like, okay, you know what? If we do this, we can get them hooked. Dopamine is going to get fired off. They're going to keep buying our games. We're going to make lots of money. I don't think that's what they were thinking. I think it's more along the lines of, let's make this as fun as we can and let's get them coming back every day because they'll enjoy it. But actually, those kind of behavior patterns on the long run isn't that great for us, because what happens once you shut the game down? Those systems are still in your brain. And I think the great way that meditation helps is that it helps us better understand how we respond to these situations. Yeah. Because once you know how your thoughts work, the nature and the way that the thoughts keep popping up, and how you understand that kind of low level anxiety, what a lot of people would call, once you kind of understand when that pops up, why is that popping up, then you can kind of mindfully start negotiating around these issues. And not necessarily by removing stuff, but once you kind of start becoming aware of these problems, again, another quote, I don't know who said it, but a problem realizes a problem half solved, right? Yeah. So it's kind of along the same lines. Meditation helps you to a large degree just to kind of identify what some of these challenges are, what some of these kind of behaviors you have are, and really find out why you feel the way you feel at certain times when without meditation you would just kind of unconsciously just go down these routes and just do these things, which won't really have a very positive outcome in your life.
The way you saw these kind of functionalities, these kind of addictive functionalities in Animal Crossing, I mean, I guess meditation to some degree can help us to see those same functionalities, or certainly those behaviors in ourselves in day-to-day life, in the way we consume media and our reaction to it, the way we have our anger almost commoditized for the benefits of the media owners or the advertisers or the political parties or whoever it is. Do you think there's a sense that games like Plane, which encourage a much more measured approach to our own sense of awareness, can help us become a little bit more less at the mercy of those who would benefit from our manipulation, if you know what I mean, if you can see what I'm getting at?
That's a very interesting question. I think even if I was to remove Plane from the equation and just talk in terms of meditation, I think certainly one should know better who you are and how you work, then you respond to those situations a lot better. I think it would certainly be more difficult to manipulate someone who does not know who he or she is than to manipulate someone who knows themselves better. Either in a very existential way of how we know ourselves, like, about being at one with everyone, or in a very practical sense, as in, this is what I like, this is what I do not like, and these are the things that, or these things will have these impacts on my life. And in some ways, meditation is what really gives you that kind of multi-layered way of multi-layered kind of understanding and wisdom that really shows you who you really are. And that wisdom, I think, will translate to more mindful decisions that we make in the real world. And certainly with the kind of way that social media and the news and everything is right now, a lot of those things would probably be, I think a lot of those things will end up becoming noise, which at least I think, but yeah, I think even beyond all of that, it is about even just day-to-day stuff. I think a lot of us struggle because we don't necessarily know what we are going through, and we don't necessarily understand at least what really all these things mean, like anxiety. What is actually that sensation of that anxiety? What does it feel like in your body? And once you start breaking that down, even just the really simple basic stuff like that, you start to respond in a completely different way to things in your life.
Yeah. I mean, it's very interesting. You said that quote, a problem recognized as a whole problem half solved. And that's the thing, we are under, and this low level anxiety you were talking about, we've got this constant climate crisis going on, and it's taking up a little bit of our attention. And there's the situation in America taking up a little bit of our attention. And we're trying to homeschool our kids. We're trying to deal with social bubbles or whatever they're called. These COVID bubbles. We're trying to how are we going to see our relatives? Constantly, there's just this churning of things to worry about all the time. And most of the time we're oblivious to it because we're just, we've got to do our work right now, or we need to cook dinner or whatever it is. But we're under actually quite a lot of pressure and stress, but we don't even
Exactly.
aware of it, and we're angry about something, and we're tired, and all of this kind of stuff. And I guess meditation helps us just to, I used to call meditation just a tea break from your thinking.
Right.
Because I would do it on the train, and I just like, I'd come out of the office and I'd be thinking about all my deadlines and all the work that I still need to finish and all the other things. Have I done that well enough? And have I done this well enough? And I would say, right, I'm not going to think about this for 10 minutes on the train home. And I'd come out of it feeling refreshed, and it's just like, I'm having a break from this. And maybe we just need a break from all of this,
That's it. I think that's a very beautiful way of saying it. It's just having a tea break from our thoughts, having a tea break from ourselves to some degree that we've kind of built up. And I think it's this whole sense of low level anxiety, and to some degree, it's I think the pandemic has taken away a lot of our coping mechanisms.
Yeah,
and that has
crutches that we come to rely on, like going to the pub, or our addiction to going to the office or whatever.
That's right. And it's not of our fault at all, but these are the ways that the kind of system has been built. Is you give up certain things, and the price, you pay a price for that. and you can deal with it by going and doing something else over here. And suddenly that is gone, and you don't have that kind of thing to balance. You don't have that counterweight, and suddenly you feel like you're at fault for suffering and not being able to cope through this. Actually, it's not down to you. These are just kind of systems and behaviors that you have built over time, in the system that you're living in. And actually, I think the pandemic is probably going to accelerate a lot of, hopefully, a lot of the positive things that have come out of it, which is exactly like you're saying, which is spending more time on ourselves, spending more time, on learning about who we are, learning about why we go towards certain things for happiness, why we avoid certain things, and learning about what causes these kind of anxieties and this kind of suffering that we have. If it's the case that you wake up and you have this low level anxiety from the morning all the way to the evening, now I think people are more likely to look at those things that have been there, than to kind of just use something else as a counterweight and then just think about looking at it some other time. But certainly I think meditation, that's exactly what it helps us do. It does help us to look at ourselves and see those things that are there and see them for really what they are, without it being bigger than what it really needs to be. And we just start to just see ourselves as organisms and as human beings who think in a certain way, who respond better to certain things. And once we start to see that, I think we just start to live a calmer, and more kind of fulfilling existence, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's that old saying, isn't there? Sometimes we need to take a break from the pursuit of happiness just to be happy.
Right.
And
That's beautiful. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we touched on it a few times already. You've already said, basically this is all about finding stuff that we already have. Our whole life we're striving and striving for something that's going to make us happy. But if we stop striving, then it becomes much easier to be happy and to find that calm and that sense of peace that we look for.
Exactly. You said that so well, because that's and I think that does require clarification, which is about not chasing after that happiness. And meditation is not about chasing after that happiness. In fact, it's not about chasing at all, but it's okay for you to chase. Like, it's because there's been lots of times where, you meditate and you're chasing after that quiet mind, you're chasing after that no mind, you're trying to be present, you're trying to do things. That is all okay. That is all part of the process. And essentially it is that walk in the woods, as you're saying that you do. It is that gardening. It is that kind of flow state, if you will, where you are, you just kind of switch gears a bit, and it's actually there was a book that I remember, written by a woman called Jill Todd, My Stroke of Insight. And it's really interesting because she talks of, I think she's a neurosurgeon, a neuroscientist. I can't remember specifically, but she studies the brain. And she ended up having a stroke where one side of her brain got shot. And she's ended up having this kind of very transcendental kind of experience, where kind of she melted in with reality and everything. And she this experience gave her this deep understanding of what, I guess to some degree, what meditation is, what really that state of being is. And she's written this book about the two kind of sides of the brain. And one of them is about being, and the other one is more about going and doing. And we need both. It's not like we have to just eject and get rid of our thoughts, but certainly meditation helps you connect with that sense of being, which isn't necessarily about happiness or feeling fun, but it's that kind of just sense of being okay. And I would even say to some degree, the sense of just being fulfilled. And I think the example that I use is, I know that, and I'm going to sound like a complete idiot when I say this, but I don't really care because I'm getting older and I'm okay with it, which is, I love when I go on holiday, one of the things that I do is in the morning, I would get up to watch the sunrise, right? And it's one of those things that I don't look forward to when it's 5 a.m. I'm not looking forward to getting up. I'm not like, oh yes, I'm so excited about going and seeing that sunrise. But it's one of those things, once you are there, You
Yeah.
feel that kind of calm, and you feel I can't even describe it. It's just really nice. And the weird thing is, afterwards, you're not like sitting in the cafe having a coffee, like, oh, I can't wait till tomorrow morning for that sunrise again. God, how many more hours before I see the sunrise again? There's a kind of state of being which is just so natural and is just so fulfilling.
Yeah.
And I think that's what really kind of meditation helps you connect with.
Yeah, I think that's really that's a great example. I used to be a photographer. I spent 10 years as a professional photographer.
Oh, wow. Right. Okay.
But now I have this kind of natural instinct to just, whenever I see something amazing, grab my phone or grab my camera and try and get a picture of it. And sometimes I just cannot get that picture. And so I have to put my phone away and just enjoy it. And it's that moment where I just like, this is mine, this moment now. It's when it's finished, it's gone. But right now it's just for me and it's just for this moment. And I guess that's
Oh,
what
that's so
that's what
beautiful.
we're trying to do, isn't it? It's just
Yeah.
accepting, we can want and we can strive our whole lives, but ultimately, when it comes down to the very end, it's how much were we just in that moment of living and being, and
That
being
is so
ourselves.
true. Yeah, that is so true, and that is so important. And certainly, I know exactly what you mean, because I've been in the same situation with my phone. I even wrote a meme about it, which I'll share with you afterwards.
Yeah, it'd be fantastic.
But it's this whole sense of this. And it's so important because and I don't think we're talking about something that is so kind of unique. I think everyone knows to some degree, like when you're at that concert, once you take about 20 pictures, then you kind of think, you know what, I actually wonder what this sounds like without my phone.
Yeah.
I think we are all wanting that. I think some of us are probably have um, other kind of counterweights, if you will. Maybe you've got a huge social media following that you feel like you need to take 500 pictures, but there will be some point in your life where you will see the same thing. We're all going towards that same thing. And but I think it's also like you're saying, it's that kind of technologies that we have around us, which is great, which can do great things if we are in control of it. But we have to be mindful about how we use it. Otherwise, we go down this route where it's more hard to be present and to be in that more natural state. Um, because I was just talking to a friend the other day about YouTube, because it's easy to criticize YouTube and say, well, there's all these different contents. There's so much political videos that's getting recommended to people. And you're like, that's absolutely true. YouTube can be a complete sinkhole of time once you really get into it. But at the same time, it has got so much interesting and awesome content, interviews with people that you would just never even imagine you could listen to. Like, you can go find videos of Degas, Salvatore Dali. You can find interviews with Heidegger. There's not that I'm really into any of these people, but it's just really strange because I used to hear my dad talk about these people, and then you can actually see videos of them as people. And there's also, you can in YouTube you can find lecture courses by like Robert Sapolsky in Stanford, where you can really understand and see about how human beings are and how our cells work, about our genetics. All these lectures are there online. We can all go see it. But the idea is that we have to kind of use technology to our benefit as opposed to technology using us, which is why it's so important for us to be more mindful and be more aware. Because if we are not, then we are going to get pushed down a sinkhole and nudged towards something that isn't really going to give us that fulfillment that we are all really, that all of us would really appreciate.
I think what you've mentioned there is it repeats itself. It's almost like a metaphor for life in a way. Because I've thought the same thing about Twitter. Twitter is full of angry people all shouting at each other. You've got people on the left, you've got people on the right, you've got people, Trump supporters, people who hate Trump, you've got all the Brexit stuff going on. But then if you want, you can just tune into the people who are making interesting video games. There are people talking about spirituality. There are people talking about philosophy. And so you can tune into a Twitter that doesn't have any of the angry stuff, but is just tuned in with what is relevant to you and enriching to you.
So
Same with
true.
YouTube. You know, I fitted my own kitchen, and I didn't know at all what I was doing, but YouTube was there full of, you know, videos about people telling you how to do tiling, how to
Right.
think, stuff like this. And it became DIY YouTube as opposed to
Yeah.
philosophical YouTube or astrophysics YouTube, you know.
Yeah.
And I think life is the same. For years, I was like a passive participant in life. And I was like, what the hell am I, when am I going to get my reward here? I've
Yeah.
been working really hard and I've been keeping my head down and doing as I'm told. When am I going to get my reward? And it wasn't until I started stepping up into life that things started working out in my favor. And I became an active participant and started
Right.
doing things that interested me. And that's when the reward came, you know. And it's the same with all of this kind of stuff. We need to be, like I said, mindful in how we use technology, but also how we interact with life. And, you know, even the thoughts in our head, we need to be mindful of
Exactly.
all of this kind of stuff going on.
100%. And can I ask you what made you make that switch from
Uh, I,
being watcher to a participant?
I was, I ended up driving. I was driving a van for a living,
Yeah.
so a supermarket delivery van, and nothing
Right.
wrong with that job. And I actually really enjoyed the job, but it's not
Yeah.
where I thought I would end up. And so I got quite depressed about it. And then I was kind of wallowing in that depression, thinking, "Oh my God, life is awful. Isn't what? How come I can't, you know, get ahead in life?" And someone said to me, "Every time we go out, I have to cheer you up." And suddenly I was like, I've become someone I don't want to be. And that was the wake up call. I kind of got tired of my own bullshit. So it was like, what do
Right.
I need to do to change this person that I've become? And I realized it was all kind of internal work. And that's how I got into meditation and got into all of this stuff, you know. And from there, I kind of became more aware of my internal processes and stuff like that.
Right.
You know, it's still it's a roller coaster ride. You know, you go in and out of it. Like I was saying with meditation, sometimes it's really working for me. Other times I feel like I'm just going through the motions.
Right.
But it's that whole, you know, becoming aware, I think, is the key thing, because life goes on and it's very noisy and it's very easy to get sucked into everything around us. But sometimes we need to kind of slow down and kind of say, well, what's actually going on inside me right now? What am I thinking and how am I feeling, and why? You know, what's causing all of this?
Right. And it's so simple, but at the same time, it is so difficult.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think definitely I can connect with what you're saying, because one, to see where you are takes a lot of courage.
Yeah.
And because we all kind of know where we want to be. And then to take that decision to go where it's not that we want to be there, but you just know you need to be there. That takes even more courage. And I think certainly my journey has been similar to yours. And nothing has really worked for me, initially at least, apart from, no, actually that's the wrong thing to say. I think certainly meditation has given me a lot of clarity that's kind of helped me, kind of at least nudge me towards the path that I've always wanted to be on.
Yeah.
Which is what I would presume is probably similar with you as well. How have you found meditation in comparison to the other things that you decided to do at that kind of crossroad to kind of go towards where you want to go?
I think meditation has been fundamental in that kind of awareness. It's almost like I do lots of things. So I have a gratitude practice.
Right.
I spend a lot of time working on my internal narrative, you know, the way I use language in the way I talk to other people and also to myself. You know, I would do things like I would caveat. So someone would say, oh, that's, you know, you've done a great piece of work there. And I'd say, oh, thanks very much, but I think so-and-so does better work. You know, there would always be some element of putting myself down or some little negative twist that I would put on stuff.
Right.
And meditation just helps me become aware of bad habits. Am I going to bed too late? Am I in a negative frame of mind right now? And what impact is that having on my kind of the world around me, that sort of thing. And, you know, and also, am I consuming too much media? Am I watching too much news? And, you know, it's little things like, I know when I'm feeling a little bit hopeless because I start buying more lottery tickets and reading my horoscopes.
Yeah.
And I know when I'm feeling totally empowered and you know, really on my A game, I don't do any of that kind of stuff.
Right.
So
Right. Right.
just having the awareness to know that, where I am right now, and to
Yeah.
make little course corrections and stuff like that. And I've had some really profound experiences through meditation. I've had things that my intuition has given me visions. I've had kind of glimpses of all kinds of amazing things. All, I'm sure, served up through my intuition. And they just kind of, I'm sure Carl Jung would have a field day with that. And he, go, what you're glimpsing, kind of your intuition is kind of messages from the divine part of you that is,
Right.
somewhere in here, and you're
Yeah.
tapping into that.
Yeah.
But then other things, it just helps me when I'm feeling frustrated. It helps me deal with that,
Yeah.
and just
Yeah. Yeah.
get,
It makes perfect sense. Makes
so,
perfect sense, and I can relate to a lot of what you're saying.
yeah. But I think as human beings, we're so caught up in the practical aspects of living and money and
Mm.
consumerism and just getting by day to day. Meditation helps us touch into something a bit more, the same thing artists get when they create a beautiful piece of art. There's part of being a human that is not all about, getting up in the morning and going to work and coming home and
Yeah.
watching TV.
Yeah.
There is more to it. And it's a gift that's been given to us by nature, and it's something we've had all along, but we kind of lose track of it because we're tied up with getting a bigger house and our pay packets and keeping our boss happy and all this kind of stuff.
Exactly.
So
Exactly. And it's entirely natural for us to fall into that trap, I think.
yeah, absolutely. But it also, this whole idea about mindfulness, people kind of roll their
Yeah.
eyes and go, "Oh, that's very kind of woo-woo right now," and
Yeah.
it's a bit hippie-ish. But actually, it's also a very natural part of who we are. We dream and we tell stories, and you know,
100%.
it's very important. And I think just to kind of wrap it up, because I feel like I've taken up lots of your time already, but I feel like playing can really help us get back to that natural part of us that is, if you don't meditate, if you don't, have that routine in your life, tools like playing can be very useful.
Yeah, I mean, even if it is not plain, if you don't have a PC, or if you have a PC but you don't want to get a game, there's I would definitely recommend Insight Timer. It's a free app. You can get it. There's lots of beginner meditation courses on there, and it is not. I would just say that the reason I made plain, and the reason I'm continuing to work on it, is that I genuinely not believe, I know that meditation is easy,
Yeah,
and it is not complicated. It's not esoteric. It's not something that only a certain few can practice. And it is not something that, it's actually easy to say what it isn't than what it is. But you don't need to have incense sticks lit up. But if you have it, it's not going to make it any more easier or difficult for you. You don't need to be in the right circle of people. You don't need to have dreadlocks, any of those things. You can be just a dude walking down the road and you can meditate.
yeah,
And it's not something that you need to invest a lot of the time learning. It is very simple. Even if you're walking and you're just feeling the muscles in your body, and you're just being aware of just your breath as you're walking, whether it's heavy or not. If you're just listening to the birds and you just continue to listen to the sounds that are out there, it's just letting you know and making you more aware of how you see things. And when you start to see how you see things, you start to see how you see yourself, and it'll only help you to really just understand yourself better, and that will just help you live a more fulfilled life. And it is about, if you want to chase happiness, if you want to be want to experience what that fulfilling happiness is like, meditation is probably a good way to kind of explore it. And certainly I would also just say, I mean, it's interesting because with plain, I think the meditators certainly don't take it very seriously because it's a game about it's a game, right? So it's like, okay, how great is it going to be? And then the gamers don't really take it seriously because it's a game about meditation, right? So it's like, how much of a game is it really? But at the end of the day, whether you use Plane or whether you use an app or whether you just go for a walk and just decide to just listen to things and see how long you can listen to things for, I think at the end of the day, it will only help you live a more fulfilled life. And I think that's what we all want at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. So if people if they want to find out more about Plane, where can they go?
Right. So if you Google meditation game, Plane will be the first link there, or you can just type in Plane. So that's PLAYNE. So that's like play and NE. And it'll be the first link there, plane.com, plane.co. You can go to Steam and search for Plane and it'll be there as well.
Fantastic. Cool. Well, I will leave you there. It's getting on a bit and I've taken up so much of your time, but that's been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for that.
Not at all. Thank you so much for having me on here, Chris. And it was great to meet you because we've talked on Twitter. So it's actually great to finally talk to you and get to know you. And hopefully speak to you again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for that.
You have a great evening. Speak to you later.
There you go. I hope you found that useful. I certainly could have gone on for quite a long time, and I think there's a chance that we might revisit this and pick up where we left off, because there is so much to unpack here about how tech can help us become more present, more mindful, about how just finding peace with our reality, our situation, the things that have gone on before, the things we need to do, and just easing that tension, that suffering can help us progress and be more present in our lives. Be here now. That's what Ram Dass said. And I think there's a lot to be said for just being present and enjoying who we are, because time goes fast. And before you know it, you'll have spent so long focusing on the future that the moment and this present will have passed you by. Anyway, there we go. I've been doing this podcast now for 3 years. It's in its third year. And I've enjoyed the conversations that I've had along the way. When I started out, just like in my life, I didn't really know where this was going. But these conversations I've been having have been an attempt for me to try and figure things out by speaking to people who seem to have figured it out for themselves, to take ownership of life and to make it whatever we need it to be in order to satisfy our desires, our needs, and to help us walk our true path. Hope you enjoy it. Check out more of the podcasts. They're on all the platforms: Apple, Spotify, wherever you need to go to get your podcasts. It's also on my website, www.chrisbrock.uk/podcasts. That's where I do all my writing as well. You can download a free copy of my latest book there as well. Check it out. Have a listen to some of the other conversations I've had. And if you have any thoughts, contact me. I'm on Instagram, Chris Brock Life. I'm everywhere, not hard to find. And if you're into gaming, if you have a computer, check out Plane as well. It's definitely a real innovation, I think, and a really useful and helpful tool for our well-being, especially in these turbulent times. All right, I really enjoyed that. So that's Plane, PLAYNE.co. And thank you to Krish for that conversation with me. In the meantime, have a lovely week. We've got some great podcasts coming up. I'm going to be speaking to Trudy Goodman, one of the leading Buddhism teachers in America. She's the founder of Insight LA. I've got Oliver Burkeman coming on the podcast as well. He used to write the column in The Guardian called "This Column Might Just Change Your Life." And I've got some really good stuff. I'm speaking to Erwin Le Corre, who is the founder of MoveNat, talking about how natural movement can help us find out who we naturally are, and lots of other interesting stuff. So keep listening, subscribe, rate, get in touch, let me know what you think, and tell all your friends, because I love doing this, and if it resonates with you, then that makes it even more worthwhile for me. All right, it's enough of me waffling. You've had enough of this already. Go and make a cup of tea, and I will see you on the next one. Cheers.